our next speaker of the day. He's a really cool guy. He's a senior manager for a company that needs no further introduction. I'm sure you've all heard of Verizon. His name is Joshua Ness, and he's an ecosystem orchestrator for 5G and emerging technology enablement, connecting physical and digital environments to create immersive and impactful experiences. He helps leadership teams across industries implement the art of the possible to develop and apply new disruptive connected technologies for industries like healthcare, manufacturing, and retail, as well as consumer areas like gaming, sports, and media.
Really enjoyed having a chance to talk to you as well. And thank you, Anka, for that presentation. I myself am a frequent user of Kayak, OpenTable, many of those other platforms there. And I'm currently waiting on Kayak to tell me when to buy my tickets to go to Asia for Christmas. And I'm hoping it's going to be soon, because I feel like those prices, phew. Anyone been to Asia for Christmas? Never done that. My name is Joshua Ness. I'm with Verizon's 5G Labs group in New York City. Anybody been to New York City? Nice. Anybody from New York City? Okay. And super excited to be here. It's my first time in Bucharest, and I've had a really good time. And so for all of those of you who live here, thank you so much. It's been a wonderful city, and it's been really great getting to know you and the whole place. I'm going to keep this at a pretty fast pace because they put me overlapping with the ballet robot dancer. And that's happening on the main stage at like 10:45. And so if you surreptitiously decide to sneak out, I won't be offended. But I'm going to try to end around 10:45, 10:50, because we can all go catch that. I also kind of want to go see it myself. So I work in a division of Verizon that has nothing to do with cell phones. In fact, I don't like cell phones. Yes, I have one, and I have two. I'm one of those weirdos that has two. I have a work phone and a personal phone. And for anybody else who has two, see, I'm sorry, it's hard. It just ruins the lines of the clothing. And I'm part of the group that works with research and development of new technologies that are going to be enabled by 5G. Because at its very core, 5G is a connectivity foundation that enables other things to be built on top of that platform. And in many cases, those are platforms themselves. And that's what I'm going to talk about today. I'm not going to talk a ton about Verizon. I have a marketing team and a website that does that. And so I'm really excited to talk with you about the technologies, what they are, what they're going to enable, and how you can start getting involved. So what is 5G? Does anyone know what the G stands for in 5G? Yeah, just shout it out. Generation, that's it. It's not something fancy. It's a marketing term. It means the 5th generation of wireless connectivity, right? And so 1G was that Zach Morris Saved by the Bell phone that we all know and love. It was that brick phone. All it enabled was calling. 2G was texting. This is a really handy way to think about it. 3G was essentially BlackBerry. It was the transmission of small amounts of data over the airwaves, email and calendar syncing. And at the time, BlackBerry was the only company that did that. Even the Palm pilots at the day had to be docked into a computer. Anybody have a Palm back in the day? Yeah, okay. And remember having like dock it, wait for the stuff to download, wait for your emails to upload and go out. And so BlackBerry made their money, made their name, because they enabled over-the-air syncing of calendar and email, small amounts of data. 4G is what we all pretty much all know and love today. It enabled a rise in collaborative technologies, the ability to stream larger amounts of data like video and music and things like that. And so, but it all didn't happen by accident. In 2007, Steve Jobs stood up on stage in Cupertino, California, and he said one more thing, right? He had the iPhone, and he was like, it's a brand new device that can do all sorts of things, and it ended up being overkill. It was a supercomputer in the pocket that rode on the back of a 3G network that enabled, like we just talked about, small amounts of data transfer like email and calendar entries. And so for several years, the iPhone itself didn't really do anything. And if you remember far enough back to 2010, when 4G was first released, the most innovative application that we had on our phones was Words with Friends. Think about it. 2010, this was the most innovative connected application on your phone. You could play Scrabble with somebody who lives in Turkey or who lives in Tennessee, right? And even things like Angry Birds that we all played, that's not connected. You could put your phone in airplane mode and they would still work. And so 4G gave rise to the promise of 4G was streaming video, and everyone was super excited that streaming video was going to come to the cell phone. And but what we all know that the market created so much more opportunity than that. It created this economy that we have today, and so many people, everyone from the gig economy to ride sharing, so many people use, excuse me, the connected cell phones on the 4G network to make their living. And when these applications and services go down, hello, Facebook, Kakao, WhatsApp, right? People really are impacted. And before 4G, that was never the case. And so these technologies, these connected technologies do enable completely new ways of life. And we're excited about that. So 5G is here. If your phone doesn't already say 5G on it, when you go out into the city, into the urban areas, it's probably going to. In a lot of markets, we're already rolling it out into the suburbs. We're even figuring out how to find innovative ways to bring it into the rural areas as well. So the technology and the infrastructure behind it is a little bit different from 4G. I'm not going to go into a ton of it right now. If you want to talk about it afterward, I'm happy to. But it is a reimagining of the network core as a whole. It's a completely different build, which is why it's taken a little bit longer to begin rolling that out, because we have to redo everything from the ground up. For most of this talk, we're going to be talking about the signals that are at the very top of this range, right? The high frequency millimeter wave above 24 gigahertz. We're really talking about that. So there are different flavors of 5G, and like I said, if you want to talk about that more, we can do that afterward. So I don't really like this slide because it insinuates that downloading a movie is something that we all do every day, and it's not. It is a very easy way to measure or to think about and compare the speeds of these different types of connectivity mediums, because we all remember LimeWire, right? We all remember Napster and how frustrating it was to try and download an album, try to download a movie, but no one ever really does that anymore. And so the problem is that all of the things that 5G will enable are still being created right now, and that's kind of what we're talking about today, because a lot of these platforms are already in place, and we just need to put the building blocks together, and it's up to a lot of the people in this room to be responsible for that. Now, I know there's a lot of information going on in this slide. I'm not going to spend a ton of time on it. I will make sure that I make it available to the organizer so you can have it afterward. But 5G comes with about 8 different currencies that enable the rise of new types of technologies that can be developed. Everything from user technologies like immersive technologies, VR, AR, Metaverse, we're going to talk about that a little bit, all the way down to expanded positioning and hyper-precise kinematics that can track your logistics and your warehousing items down to the centimeter. These are things that 5G enables, much more so than GPS. And so the whole idea is to usher in this fourth industrial revolution. We've all heard this term before, right? I-4-O. And what that really means is this merger of physical and digital. And if you're anything like me, it takes a lot of wrapping your head around what that actually means. How do physical and digital actually begin to merge together? And by the end of this, I think you're going to have a pretty good idea of how that can happen and why things like blockchain and NFTs are being described incomplete so far. So I mentioned that 5G itself is a platform that enables other technologies to grow and thrive. Edge computing is one of them. Anybody familiar with edge computing? It's the idea that you can take cloud computing, which is used in servers, right? Server farms that are located potentially hundreds or even thousands of miles away from where you are, the end user. And when those things go down, anybody read about the Kakao outage that happened in South Korea 2 weeks ago? 32,000 servers caught fire, brought the entire application down. And in something like edge computing, where we take that server capacity, we bring that closer to the end user in a more distributed function, now that enables new processes that can be offloaded from the device itself, whether that's a cell phone, whether it's an IoT device or what have you, into the edge and then processed and then sent back to the phone using something like 5G as that connectivity medium, right? And so now we've taken the need for such a robust processor off of the end user device. Okay. Now, the reason why your phone looks the way that it does, and the reason why a lot of hardware has the form factor that it does, is because there's a battery powering that processor. Well, if we can offload those functions, and we can put those into the edge, come on, buddy, then the entire nature of those devices can change, right? And so this is kind of what we're talking about. If that information can stay in the network, it never has to go out into the open internet. And that has huge implications for latency. It has implications for data volume that can be computed. And it has huge implications for security. Because if the signal never leaves the network, then it is much less vulnerable to anybody trying to access that information. Lots and lots of benefits coming from edge computing, which is really only able to be used with a connectivity medium like 5G. So that enables us to really start expanding what we think about serverless, how we start creating algorithms, how we start creating infrastructure that can start handling these things in real time, really, really snappy, right? It enables the next layer of technology, which is the logic component, right? So we've talked about connectivity, we've talked about the compute that sits on top of that. Now the logic and the intelligence that sits on top of the compute now really starts to get our brains working about what the technology can do and what we can do with it. Which, if we're talking about distributed AI on a whole bunch of different nodes everywhere around the world, what's the worst that could happen? Which brings us to the hardware layer. Now, this is where I start to have a little bit of a gripe with what we're doing on the hardware side, because we're introducing things like foldable phones, which, sure, it's kind of cool. I think it's a little gimmicky. It doesn't really take advantage of any of these types of technologies that we're talking about. And so I think, and if there's anyone who work for the OEMs here right now, I really hope that we start considering how we start thinking about developing new types of hardware that really begin to unlock a lot of the capabilities and functions of these technologies. So we have things like something like an old school HoloLens. Microsoft, of course, acquired that. There's a lot of other types of augmented and virtual reality types of devices and companies. A lot of them in the current economic climate are being scaled back in their development. Magic Leap is one of those companies that, of course, is not. It's their entire bread and butter. And this was just this past year where they really see a growing demand in the consumer market for the way that that mixed reality is going to be used not only by enterprises, but also by end users. And so we've tried this before, right? Does everybody remember this guy? Anybody remember what he was called? He had a nickname. No, he was called a glass hole. Because he was wearing these things, and he usually had that smirk on his face, right? And he was you never knew if he was filming you or not. And whether he was posting it to his Google Plus page, which, where'd that go? And so these devices, they quickly exited the consumer market. They're still available for enterprise because they do perform some interesting functions. It was the beginnings of a heads-up display. It was the beginnings of being able to film and do things with that. And then you have the beginnings of VR, and fortunately, VR has come a long way since this. It's funny, I actually know this woman who filmed this, and it's pretty funny. And so, does anybody have a VR headset? Anybody have a Quest 2 or something else? No? Okay. There's a lot that you can do with them, and I promise you it has come a long way since this right here. So we have these new types of devices that are beginning to come on the market right now. This is a collaboration between Meta and Ray-Ban, which is essentially the same thing as Google Glass, except it also allows you to make phone calls. And it films things, it allows you to post those things to your Facebook page, and as a society, we're a little bit more comfortable with this type of device being on someone else's head in the world around us. So I think the timing is right for a lot of these new technologies to begin to come to market and to begin to be used. This is a prototype of a company called North that was based in Toronto, and they had an office in Brooklyn. I went to their showroom, pretty cool. And it was like a proper heads-up display bordering on proper augmented reality. They were acquired by Google and rolled into their AR team, and hopefully they continue to produce interesting things. The Magic Leap 2, right? These are, the form factor gets much, much lower, but you can still see it's connected to that battery pack. And yeah, these things do require battery to function. It requires connectivity. As we start to be able to move these processes into the edge, like I was talking about, I think we're going to see these things start to change. But you can see that they're making them for consumers. They want consumers to begin using these things. And one of the things missing is the content that's going to be on there. And we can talk about that here in a second. Even virtual reality, the form factor is is going to be coming down a lot once these new things are adopted. This is a prototype rendering of what a VR headset might look like, or what it could look like if we were able to remove some of those requirements from the device itself and offload those into the network. Ideally, one would be able to be walking in the park and realize that their favorite soccer match was going on, which almost happened to me. I happen to be a West Ham fan. I'm sorry if you're a Stour fan. I was there last night. I bought a last-minute ticket. But imagine if I wasn't able to do that, and I wasn't able to go to that match, but I still wanted to be there, and I wanted to be present in the moment. I wanted to feel like I was at the match itself. Being able to put on virtual reality headset or virtual reality device that I had in my pocket and be able to be watching the game from the viewpoint of one of the players or of other positions of cameras placed throughout the field. So the Brooklyn Nets, who are a basketball team, they did something pretty interesting. They put a couple hundred volumetric capture cameras around the arena in Brooklyn, and it captures all this data, all this information from the game, and then enables a 3D, fully virtualized replay of the game to occur, to study things like shot patterns, to study things like coverage patterns, to help the players become better and help the coaches be more effective at coaching the players. But imagine if that was used in real time. Imagine if you were able to then put on your headset and watch the game from the perspective of one of the players. Right now, we have things like cameras, excuse me, embedded into jerseys of things like American football, right? So you can see things from their perspective in certain instances. We don't need the cameras to do that on the players themselves if we have them volumetrically capturing all of that data in real time, because we can see the orientation of the players and how it moves around, and that requires a few things that we've already talked about. It requires the artificial intelligence to collate all of that data into one single perspective of information. It requires the compute to operate that AI, and it requires the connectivity that the compute relies on. Okay? So it's all starting to come together. And we're starting to see these environments already begin to grow. If anybody was fortunate enough to sit in Nick Rosa's talk from Accenture, it was the final session on the main stage yesterday. It was really good. If you missed it, highly recommend looking it up whenever the videos are released. He talked about some of these environments that we're already starting to see activity in. AltSpace was purchased by, I think, also Microsoft. And it is a fantastic place to go in and begin experimenting and exploring. If you have that VR headset, highly recommend checking it out. And if not, you'll find, like I said, the technology's come a long way, and it's going even further. And so holographic glasses, this is actually a real representation of something that Stanford and NVIDIA are working on as of just about a month ago. So that people are already trying to bring these form factors down and make them available to the public in due time. And they will rely on a lot of these technologies to get it done, including things like taste technology, virtual tasting. It's something that we can't even really wrap our heads around right now, but the ability to crunch such large amounts of data, even something like this, could be used in a real-time function if those connectivity and compute components were in place. So let's talk about the other stuff that can ride on top of that can bring it all together. Now, I know the session title has Web3 in it, connected worlds, all of that. In my opinion, and if you were sitting into Nick's talk yesterday, he talks about how the Metaverse is not Web3, and Web3 is not the Metaverse. Also, there's only one Metaverse. It's not Metaverses. There are different components and platforms you can use to access the Metaverse. And also, the Metaverse is all around you. It's not just virtual reality. It will end up being augmented reality, mixing with the physical world and everything in between. So we all have some sort of idea of what we think these technologies are. And for the most part, we're kind of on the right track. But most people would have some sort of explanation of this when you're talking about some of these more dense technologies, right? So there's a lot of them going on. Most of them are in fact interrelated, and they have specific definitions, right? They do perform certain specific functions, and they do all end up ultimately working together. I'll leave this up here for just one second. So we've heard the concept of Web 3, and just a quick refresher, it is the semantic web. It's the idea that Web 1 was static pages. You go to yahoo.com, you read the news, you close the computer, off you go. Web 2 really started with something like MySpace. That was one of the big websites that really allowed us to begin interacting with people, right? Which then morphed into the social media landscape that we have right now, the ability to send information back and forth and to interact with society digitally. Web 3 says that doesn't need to be centralized in some company like Meta or any of the others, but we can begin distributing so many of those functions. We can control our own data. We can control who has access to it, and in some senses, we can trade services and different value propositions for that data. It also means that certain types of transactions can be performed, and they will contain many things like the integrity of the transaction, in that it cannot be altered, as well as provenance, so we can go all the way back to the very beginning of when that transaction took place. And we'll talk about that here in just a second. This thing is finicky. I don't even know where I'm supposed to be pointing it. Ah. You're killing me, dog. Technology is great when it works. Just a quick, another slide kind of highlighting what those layers tend to look like when you're comparing Web 1, 2, and 3. So getting into where these things all blend together, and I promise I'm going to wrap up here in just a few minutes. This is a piece of augmented reality art. Now, I'm going to ask you to not necessarily suspend belief for a second, but start to accept that certain things might be real. This is a piece of augmented reality art in front of the National Arts Club in New York City. It was commissioned by the National Arts Club, and they asked for it to be placed there. And you can see when it slides back, you can see that there's a QR code that you scan in order to open this up. And in a lot of cases, that's how we experience digital representations in the physical world. It started off with filters on things like Snapchat and things like Instagram, like the unicorn rainbow vomit and the puppy dog ears and faces. That's augmented reality. The fact that you can see what sneakers might look like on your feet or what a sofa might look like in your apartment or your home, that's augmented reality. And you require a specific platform to pull that up or scan a particular code to bring that up. Now, so a company like Snap has their own creator studio. The creator economy is moving into the digital sphere, and we know that because NFTs, nobody would shut up about them about a year ago, right? We've kind of moved beyond that, and NFTs are still a pretty good market for digital artists, but it got more people interested in digital art for a lot of the benefits that we've already talked about. An NFT is simply just a record. It is a token that says this particular thing was created by this particular person and belongs to this person, and maybe there's some transaction data that was contained in there as well. An NFT is not the piece of art itself. That's just art. The NFT is the thing that says what it is, who it belongs to, and any other metadata that you want to put in there, right? So this particular piece of art could have been created on something like the Snap platform. And in that case, if you have the Snap application on your phone, or if you have Snap goggles, and they do have these spectacles, right? Snap spectacles, we've seen those. They're essentially augmented reality glasses that can call up information and assets like this from the Snap creator platform. And you can get a notification even that says, hey, did you know there's a Snap experience nearby? Click this icon, fire it up, and take a look at it, either from your phone or from those spectacles. Now, we asked for this to be here. I say we because I'm from New York and I'm actually a member of this organization. We asked for it to be here, and so we're okay with that being there. Now imagine that we didn't, and imagine that this particular object existed right there, here in this space at GoTech. GoTech didn't know about it. Somebody put it there and geo-anchored it right there. And so now everyone here who has Snap on their cell phone or on their spectacles is getting a notification, hey, look at this thing that's here right here. And maybe it's innocuous, maybe it's totally fine. Do you think that GoTech would care? Probably not. Would they even know about it? Probably not. Now imagine that it wasn't this. Imagine that it was a banner across that entire side that said the name of that particular political candidate that you don't like. Would they care then? I think they probably would. So I'm from Texas originally. Anybody been to Texas? Yeah, you're not missing too much. Hey, So in Texas, when you own land, and a lot of people who own houses do own the land that it sits on, you own that land down to the center of the earth and up into space. So that when oil and gas companies want to come and drill pipes under your property, they have to get your permission, and they probably have to pay you. And if utility companies want to string lines across your property, they have to tell you about it and get your permission, and they probably have to pay you monthly, right? So property rights exist in the X, Y, and Z spectrum. Do they exist in this? Do property rights exist in the virtual world? Does GoTech have a say, or does Rome Expo have a say, in what virtual assets get geo-anchored to their space, especially if it's something that they might not like? I don't know. Right now, there's no legal infrastructure around that, but there will be. How will we control that? The answer is with these Web3 technologies. Now, Nick yesterday gave an example of the Coca-Cola logo that was authorized to creators using smart contracts contained within a non-fungible token. And those smart contracts said, you can use this logo to create art or to create assets or to create virtual assets that you can then sell. You can make money off that. But contained within that contract, smart contract within the NFT, was something called provenance. Provenance says that Coca-Cola owns that logo, and any sale on the primary market, the secondary market, the tertiary market, portions of that sale automatically go back to the Coca-Cola company because those transactions are made using cryptocurrencies, which is another Web3 function of blockchain. And the record is recorded on that blockchain using that non-fungible token changing hands. So now, that's a prime example of the intersection of Web3 and Metaverse. And so something like this could, in fact, be authorized by a company or an organization like GoTech to a company like Coca-Cola or any other creator that says, yes, you have my permission to create a digital asset and place it and geo-anchor it in this particular space. If transactions occur, portions of that get sent back to the organizer, and that can all just be hard encoded into the contract. And if for some reason they violate the terms of the agreement, that token can be revoked, and that whole thing goes away instantly. So now we're starting to talk about how virtual and digital assets can be overlaid onto the physical world, and they can be done properly. They can be done with people's permission. They can be done so that the right people get credit for it, and the right people get paid for it, right? This also extends to the virtual world. Now imagine that, so I'm in, like I said, I'm in New York City. Imagine somebody built a digital twin of New York City, and they sold access to this digital twin for, let's say, I don't know, $30, $29 or something. And they used private organizations, let's say like the National Arts Club here, as a selling point. Come see, because it's in an old like 1840s mansion, right? Come see the National Arts Club. Maybe you can even walk inside. But if the National Arts Club didn't authorize that, and they didn't get told that their asset, their physical asset, was being used for commercial functions in the virtual space, should they have given permission for it? And should they get a cut? Maybe it's only 5 cents on the sale. Maybe it's more. But if their physical asset is being used to make money in the virtual world, do they have a say, and should they get paid? Some would argue yes. A lot of people would argue yes. Right now, there's no legal infrastructure around this, but there will be, I promise you. The same thing for assets that exist in the virtual world, right? Birkin bag. Anybody own a Birkin bag? We're going to be friends later. We're going to talk. Birkin bags are very, very expensive. You can't go buy one. You have to be invited to buy one. And they are not necessarily the best bag in the world. They are a lifestyle statement. They are a statement piece that someone has, and they have a Birkin. People who know what a Birkin is see that Birkin, and they're like, damn, I wish I could get one, right? Now, let's say you own this bag. You could have it with you all the time. You could have it with you now. You could have it next to your bed when you go to sleep. You could potentially have this bag with you 100% of the time, extracting as much value out of this bag as you possibly can. Now, what if you start spending about 20% of your time in the virtual world? You can't take your bag with you, right? Does the bag lose 20% of its value? Might. So what could what could Hermes do, right? They could sell a tokenized digital version of this bag that someone can take with them into the metaverse. Now, yes, it can be copied just the same way this bag can be copied in Chinatown in New York City, and they are frequently. The point is that you know yours are original, and you have that knowledge, and you can walk around knowing it, and other people might not know or care, but you know. And that is part of the lifestyle statement. Now those types of advantages can extend into the virtual world using things like Web3 concepts, using tokenization, using provenance, so that if you decide to sell that digital asset, it could be written into that contract, that smart contract, that part of that sale goes back to Hermes and they continue to get credit for it, right? These examples are already starting to manifest themselves in the virtual world. Brands are creating things and then selling them. People like you and me, and Nick called that the top-down approach. The bottom-up approach is someone like you might be creating cool sneakers that somebody might be able to wear in something like Decentraland, and being able to sell those and push your product out there. And you can write those same stipulations into those smart contracts that live and reside on the blockchain. So the merger of virtual, digital, and physical are on the way, and in some cases they are already here. And they are creating new ways for people to recognize value, to enter new commercial markets, and to present themselves in new and interesting ways. Because if there's one thing we've learned about the virtual world is you can be who you want to be. If you identify as a 9-foot-tall purple gorilla, you can be a 9-foot-tall purple gorilla. And if you identify as somebody who has aspirations for higher lifestyle than your salary currently affords, you can do that. And the technologies that underpin that are what we talked about, coming from the top down, the actual application of the technology itself, which we just finished discussing, the devices on which those applications run, the logic which performs the function that makes those applications work, the compute layer, which holds that logic layer, that allows it to function in real time, and then the connectivity layer, which is something like 5G, which enables that to be everywhere and operating in real time. And this will open up as soon as we can get away from having this static 2D screen in front of us, and we start having more access and more options to new types of interfaces. More of these things will come to market faster and better, and people will begin to put money and things into them. Creators will come and create the experiences that everyone's waiting for. But right now, there's a little bit of a mismatch in the market because if you remember at first, there was the iPhone. Everybody wanted this really cool piece of hardware that really did nothing except waste time with Words with Friends and Angry Birds. When 4G was released 4 years later, there was this explosion. You look at the history books. In 2010, 2011, there was this movement to mobile. You remember Facebook's stock went down. It was tanking in 2010 because everyone said, your customers are moving to mobile, you're not going to be able to monetize the way that you monetize on the web, and we don't believe that you have a valuable, reliable value proposition anymore. And of course, Mark Zuckerberg said, hold my beer, and went and created the mobile version that we have today, right? That's going to happen again, because right now that paradigm has shifted. It's flipped on its head, really. We have connectivity and compute mediums that are way too advanced for what we have in our hands right now, what in our pockets right now. As soon as those types of interface technologies begin to evolve to meet those capabilities, a lot of what we just talked about here today is going to become a reality. So, how do you start getting involved? The answer is you can get involved now, and this would normally be where I push my company, and that's cool. We do some really cool stuff with everything that we talked about here today. If you're interested in what Verizon does, is more of like a managed services perspective, because that's how we operate most things outside of the US. Happy to talk to you about that. I'm mostly here to talk about the technology. I get excited about this stuff. I hope you get excited about it too. But be sure you're asking yourselves these questions as you're considering how to put these technologies to work within your own organizations. Because here's the thing. Your competitors already are. Your customers are already starting to expect it. And no one is innovating in a vacuum. Everyone is innovating around you. And if you are not considering how those organizations are innovating, the different expectations that your customers have as they are innovating, who would have thought that there would be if there's 54 million daily active users in Roblox, daily, and if 40% of those are under 13 years old, That means that there's a lot of people who are about to grow up and make purchase decisions who are already expecting everything that we just talked about. If that doesn't terrify you, shit. That was my big exit. Can we put that last slide up? Anyway. My presentation in 10 seconds. This is me. Be happy to talk to anybody. I'm gonna hang out here for a few more minutes. I know we have another speaker coming up. If anybody has any questions, happy to answer them. I think the robot ballet dance has already started. But yeah, I'll be hanging out here. I might stop by the IT Ops Lounge over there if anybody wants to keep on talking. But yeah, this is me. This is my contact information. That's my Twitter handle. If anyone's using Instagram, please take a picture of me. Go ahead and tag it with GoTech. I'm sure they love what they're doing. My Instagram is a little bit different from this, but just type in my name. You'll find it. And yeah, super grateful to the organizers for GoTech, for everyone who's working. Honestly, the people wearing the black shirts around here are doing all of the work. So please stop them and say thank you when you see them. But yeah, thank you to everyone who's been here. Claudio for having to do the hard job of introducing everyone and making them sound cool. But thank you to you for being here. This has been super fun. Thanks a lot.
Wow, Joshua, such a great presentation, man. It's not that hard to make you look cool, actually. You do yourself that. Thanks, everybody.